The mindset of people who escape poverty is not motivational. It's not pretty. It's not Instagram. It's not quotes about grinding at 5 a.m. It's psychological war. Because poverty is not just a lack of money. It is a system that attacks your thinking. It attacks how you see yourself. It attacks what you believe is possible. It attacks how long you can hold discomfort without collapsing. And most people never escape poverty because they never escape the mindset poverty installs in them. Poverty teaches you urgency. When the rent is due, when the fridge is empty, when your account balance feels like a countdown timer. Your brain stops thinking long-term. It shifts into survival mode. And survival mode is dangerous. Because survival mode is emotional. It's reactive. It's short-term. It's desperate. The person who escapes poverty understands something most don't. Survival mode keeps you alive, but it will never make you wealthy. So they do something that feels unnatural. They slow down when everything in them wants to panic. They think long-term when their reality screams short-term. That is not easy. When you grow up watching bills destroy peace, when you see arguments over money, when you see stress become normal, your nervous system gets trained to associate money with fear, and fear-based decisions are expensive. The people who escape poverty develop emotional control before they develop income. That's the first shift. They stop making financial decisions based on urgency. They stop chasing fast money. They stop gambling on miracles. They stop believing that one big opportunity will save them. Because that belief is a trap. Poverty sells you the fantasy of the breakthrough. One day, one lucky chance, one viral moment, one big trade, one connection. But the mindset that escapes poverty doesn't chase explosions. It builds foundations. And foundations are boring. They require consistency. They require discipline. They require doing small, repetitive things without applause. Most people in poverty are addicted to intensity. Because intensity feels like progress. But intensity without structure leads back to zero. The person who escapes poverty becomes obsessed with stability, not status, not flexing, not looking rich. Stability. They care more about predictability than excitement. They understand that emotional highs are often followed by financial crashes. So they build slowly, and slowly feels like failure in the beginning. Because when you're used to crisis, calm feels unfamiliar. Another shift. They stop identifying with their struggle. This is subtle but powerful. Many people wear poverty as identity. They say things like, "I'm just broke." People like us don't get ahead. This is how it is. And those statements quietly build a psychological cage. The mindset that escapes poverty refuses to romanticize struggle. They respect where they came from, but they do not live there mentally. They detach their identity from their circumstances. They say, "I am currently broke," not, "I am broke." That one word changes everything. Currently means temporary. Identity means permanent. The second shift is delayed gratification, and not the fake kind. Real delayed gratification means sacrificing comfort when nobody is watching. It means investing in skills instead of clothes. It means studying when you're tired. It means saving when you want to impress. It means saying no to social validation. Poverty pressures you to prove yourself, to show you're not behind, to show you're not struggling, to show you're successful. But the person who escapes poverty is comfortable looking unimpressive. They understand that wealth grows in silence. They choose long-term power over short-term attention. And that requires emotional maturity. because emotionally immature decisions are expensive. Impulse purchases, impulse relationships, impulse opportunities, impulse business ideas. The poverty mindset reacts. The growth mindset calculates. Another uncomfortable truth: people who escape poverty often outgrow their environment, and that is painful. Because your environment shapes your standards. If everyone around you believes survival is enough, you will struggle to aim higher. If everyone normalizes debt, you will normalize debt. If everyone complains but never acts, you will slowly become one of them. The mindset that escapes poverty understands proximity is power. They change what they consume, not just food, information, conversations, influences. They start feeding their brain differently, because poverty is often generational information passed down like inheritance. Money is hard. Rich people are evil. We're not lucky. And those beliefs quietly cap potential. The person who escapes poverty questions inherited beliefs. They audit their thoughts. They ask, is this true? Or is this just what I was told? The questioning alone creates mental freedom. And mental freedom comes before financial freedom, not blaming their past. They may. Not blaming their past. They may acknowledge unfairness, but they don't sit in it. Because sitting in unfairness feels justified, but it produces nothing. Self-accountability is brutal. It forces you to admit, maybe I lack skills. Maybe I lack discipline. Maybe I waste time. Maybe I avoid discomfort. That level of honesty is rare, but that honesty is power. Because once something is your responsibility, it becomes changeable, and changeable is hopeful. They also understand skill stacking. Escaping poverty rarely happens through one skill. It happens through combinations. Communication plus discipline. Sales plus empathy. Technical ability plus consistency. Networking plus reliability. They build themselves like assets. They think, how do I become valuable? Not, how do I get lucky? Value compounds. Luck fades. Another psychological shift. They stop fearing money. This sounds strange, but many people from poverty subconsciously sabotage income because money feels foreign. Foreign feels unsafe. Safe feels familiar. And familiar, even if painful, is comfortable. So when opportunities appear, they procrastinate. They self-doubt. They hesitate. The mindset that escapes poverty works on deserving, not entitlement. Deserving. They build competence until confidence follows. Confidence without competence is fragile. Competence builds quiet belief. They also manage energy like currency. Poverty drains energy, stress, overthinking, comparison, embarrassment. And drained people cannot build long-term, so they protect their mental state. They limit who has access to their time. They limit distractions. They become intentional, not perfect, intentional. And here's something most won't admit. They endure loneliness. Growth is isolating. When you stop participating in old habits, you stop fitting into old circles. When you say no to spending, you get called boring. When you choose work over hanging out, you get misunderstood. But they accept temporary isolation for permanent elevation. They also redefine failure. In poverty, failure feels fatal. Because resources are limited, one mistake can feel catastrophic. But the mindset that escapes poverty reframes failure as tuition. Every mistake teaches. Every loss sharpens awareness. Every setback builds resilience. They detach ego from outcome. And ego is expensive. Ego keeps you in losing situations. Ego keeps you from asking for help. Ego keeps you pretending. They choose learning over looking good. That alone separates trajectories. Another major shift? They develop patience. Real patience. not passive waiting, strategic patience. They understand compounding. Money compounds, skills compound, reputation compounds, habits compound. But compounding requires time without interruption. Most people interrupt their own progress. They start, they stop, they doubt, they switch, they quit. The mindset that escapes poverty commits longer than others. They stay focused when results are invisible, because they understand invisible growth is still growth. And finally, they believe change is possible for them, not just for others. Belief is not magic, it is permission. If you don't believe escape is possible, you won't tolerate the discomfort required. If you believe it is possible, you endure differently. You sacrifice differently. You persist differently. You recover faster. The mindset of people who escape poverty is not loud. It's quiet. It's disciplined. It's strategic. It's patient. It's emotionally controlled. It understands that poverty is a psychological battlefield before it is a financial one. And the war is won in the mind long before it shows in the bank account. Because once you change how you think about time, about money, about responsibility, about comfort, about identity, your decisions change. And when decisions change consistently, outcomes eventually follow, not instantly, but inevitably. And that is the real secret. Escaping poverty is not about one breakthrough. It is about becoming the type of person who cannot stay there. And once you become that person, it's only a matter of time. But time will test you. Because becoming the type of person who cannot stay in poverty doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easier. It means the excuses become harder to tolerate. There will be days when progress feels invisible. Days when you work, learn, sacrifice, and nothing changes on the outside. Your bank account still looks small. Your environment still looks the same. Your family still doesn't understand. Your friends still doubt you. And that's where most people relapse. They don't go back because they're incapable. They go back because they're exhausted. The mindset that escapes poverty prepares for that exhaustion. They expect it. They know motivation fades. They know discipline feels heavy. They know doubt gets loud. So they don't rely on feelings. They rely on systems. Systems are what separate emotional people from strategic people. A system wakes you up even when you don't feel inspired. A system makes you save even when you want to spend. A system forces you to learn even when you're tired. Poverty thrives in chaos. Escaping poverty requires structure. Structure in your schedule. Structure in your spending. Structure in your goals. Structure in your relationships. And structure feels restrictive at first, especially if you grew up without it. But discipline is not a prison. It's protection. Another uncomfortable truth: people who escape poverty become extremely careful with who they listen to. Advice is everywhere, but not all advice is equal. Some advice comes from people who never left survival mode. Some advice comes from people projecting their own fear. Some advice comes from people who secretly don't want you to outgrow them. The mindset that escapes poverty filters input. They ask, does this person have the results I want? Does this advice align with long-term growth? Is this opinion based on fear or experience? They stop absorbing negativity by default. Because words shape thinking. Thinking shapes decisions. Decisions shape destiny. And destiny is too expensive to outsource to insecure voices. Another shift that almost nobody talks about. They develop emotional detachment from money. Not irresponsibility. Not carelessness, detachment. They stop seeing money as validation. They stop tying self-worth to income. Because when your identity depends on money, you will panic when it fluctuates. And panic leads to bad decisions. Instead, they see money as a tool for options, a tool for stability, a tool for freedom, not a symbol of superiority. That attachment gives them clarity. When an opportunity appears, they analyze it logically. They don't chase it because it looks impressive. They don't reject it because it feels scary. They measure risk versus reward calmly. And calm thinking compounds faster than emotional reactions. Another deep difference: they learn to sit with discomfort. Poverty makes you sensitive to discomfort. Any inconvenience feels threatening. But growth requires voluntary discomfort. Studying when you'd rather scroll. Working overtime when you're tired. Investing in yourself instead of buying temporary pleasure. The mindset that escapes poverty increases their discomfort tolerance. They train it like a muscle because they understand something powerful. Your income grows in proportion to the problems you can solve and the discomfort you can handle. If you collapse under pressure, you stay small. If you expand under pressure, you grow. They also become extremely aware of time. Time is different when you're broke. You trade it cheaply. You waste it easily. You underestimate its value. But the mindset that escapes poverty sees time as capital. They protect it. They ask, is this conversation building me? Is this habit moving me forward? Is this distraction worth my future? They stop saying, I have time, and start saying, I have today. That urgency is not panic. It's focus. And focus is rare. Another shift is learning financial literacy. Not in theory, in practice. They learn how interest works. They understand debt traps. They understand assets versus liabilities. They understand budgeting without ego. Because poverty often hides behind financial ignorance. You can work hard for years and still stay stuck if you don't understand how money flows. The mindset that escapes poverty doesn't just earn. They manage. They multiply. They protect. They build emergency funds before luxury. They prioritize stability before status. They think protection before expansion. That order matters. Expansion without protection leads back to zero. Another major psychological evolution. They stop competing with people at their level. Comparison is a poverty amplifier. If you're constantly measuring yourself against friends who are also struggling, you normalize struggle. If you measure yourself against people years ahead, you might feel intimidated, but you stretch. The mindset that escapes poverty uses comparison strategically, not to feel inferior, but to identify gaps. They ask, what skills do they have that I don't? What habits are they consistent with? What mindset differences exist? And instead of feeling threatened, they feel instructed. That emotional maturity is rare, because ego wants comfort. Growth demands humility. They also understand leverage. Time alone won't make you wealthy. You need leverage. Leverage in skills. Leverage in networks. Leverage in technology. Leverage in reputation. They ask, how can I multiply my effort? Instead of working harder forever, they work smarter over time. They learn skills that pay more per hour. They create income streams that don't require constant presence. They build relationships that open doors. Poverty thinks in hours. Wealth thinks in systems. That shift alone changes everything. And here's something deeper. They forgive their past. Many people stay trapped, not because of lack of opportunity, but because of shame. Shame about where they started. Shame about past mistakes. Shame about financial ignorance. Shame freezes growth. The mindset that escapes poverty forgives themselves for not knowing earlier. They accept, I did the best I could with what I knew. And then they upgrade what they know. Without forgiveness, every mistake becomes identity. With forgiveness, every mistake becomes education. Another quiet but powerful trait. They delay lifestyle upgrades. When income increases, most people increase spending. New phone, better clothes, nicer car, more eating out. And suddenly, they're still living paycheck to paycheck. The mindset that escapes poverty resists lifestyle inflation. They allow income to grow faster than expenses. That gap becomes investment. That gap becomes security. That gap becomes freedom. Freedom is built in that gap, not in flashy purchases. They also learn to say no without guilt. No to distractions. No to unnecessary expenses. No to draining people. No to opportunities that don't align. Saying no feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to people pleasing. But every yes costs time. Every yes costs energy. Every yes costs focus. And focus is too valuable to waste. Another key element, they redefine success. In poverty, success is often visual. Big house, nice car, expensive clothes. But the mindset that escapes poverty sees success as control. Control over time, control over decisions, control over emotional reactions, control over environment. Control is quiet. It doesn't need applause. It needs consistency. And consistency beats intensity every time. They also understand something most people ignore. Your circle predicts your ceiling. If you're surrounded by people who mock ambition, you will shrink. If you're surrounded by people who value growth, you will expand. So sometimes escaping poverty requires changing rooms, changing cities, changing environments, changing friend groups. That transition is painful, but comfort zones are expensive. Another overlooked shift. They stop fearing judgment. When you grow, you will be judged. When you fail, you will be judged. When you try something new, you will be judged. So they realize, judgment is unavoidable. And once you accept that, you stop letting it control you. Fear of judgment keeps many people broke. They don't start businesses. They don't ask for raises. They don't invest in themselves because they're afraid of looking foolish. But staying small to look safe is the most expensive decision of all. The mindset that escapes poverty chooses growth over image. Every time. They also become extremely aware of their emotional triggers. Stress spending, emotional eating, avoidance scrolling, procrastination. They identify patterns. They don't say, this is just how I am. They say, this is a pattern I can change. Self-awareness is the foundation of transformation. Without awareness, you repeat cycles unconsciously. With awareness, you interrupt them intentionally. And maybe the most powerful trait of all, they refuse to let temporary setbacks define permanent identity. A failed business does not make them a failure. A lost job does not make them worthless. A financial mistake does not make them incompetent. They separate events from identity, because identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as someone who always messes up, you will subconsciously prove it. If you see yourself as someone who learns and adapts, you will act accordingly. And over time, that identity shift rewrites your trajectory. Escaping poverty is not a straight line. It's messy. It's frustrating. It's humbling. It's slow.